Everyone, and welcome to this. I think it's ninth session, Jelani Sahab, of your series of seminars. Topic today, as you know, is power generation in Australia and what engineers are doing in power generation in Australia. So I'll give you a quick intro of myself. My name is Tanveer Syed. I'm a mechanical engineer by profession. I'm CP Eng, NER registered. I'm also certified associate of Asset Management Council. Other than that, I do a bit of other community work. As a part of that community work, I'm the engineering lead of a not-for-profit organization called Australian Association of Pakistani Professionals, AAPP.org. I'm also a founder member and vice president of a Muslim organization called Gippsland Australian Muslim Community INC, GMC, GMCI.org. And this is my LinkedIn link on the intro slide. So a bit more introduction about me. That's me. I'm basically from Karachi, Pakistan, and in Australia, I'm from Gippsland, as I mentioned. When I came to Australia, I actually came through my job. So I was working for the same company over there in Pakistan, and they moved me here initially as a secondment on a project and then offered me a permanent position. So I came to Gippsland directly from Pakistan and then they made Gippsland my home. Currently, I'm living in Melbourne, not in Gippsland, because of my job, the new job that it's no more new. It's 4 years now with AGL. I'm working with AGL. So I'm married since 1990. I've got 4 children and 7 grandchildren. I have 35 years of experience in power generation field, all in power generation field, all sorts of experience from operation to maintenance to asset management to construction, building very large size utility power stations for many, many years. I played cricket and hockey like many of us do from Pakistan. I'm an Australian citizen since 2008. I have done my master's from Monash. And I have degree in commerce as well. I have a postgraduate diploma in business management, and I have certificate in senior leadership development from Melbourne Business School, Melbourne Uni. I started my career back those days. It's called KSC, now it's K Electric in Karachi, equivalent to WAPDA in rest of the country. In 1985 from Bin Qasim Power Station. And I worked for various global organizations. Can you guys hear me and see my presentation? I just didn't check that.
Yes, we can. All good.
Okay, all right, thank you. So then I worked for various global power companies, big organizations like GE, like IHI, Japanese company, like Deutsche Babcock, the German company, for various power plant construction projects. And then I joined National Power at the time, British company, and currently a French company called Engie, one of the largest, I think the largest in IPP in the world, has 200,000, 220,000 employees around the world. I worked for that company for 22 years. Started from Hub Power Company, Hubco, at Hub Power Station, worked for various different power stations in the UK, for the same company time to time, and then moved to Australia at Hazelwood Power Station, which now shut down and under demolition. Shut down in March 2016. And since then I joined AGL, currently working for AGL since 2016 as lead engineer, leading the renewables, AGL renewables, for their strategy and risk portfolio. And I'm a community leader. I'm formally trained and graduated from a leadership program in Gippsland. And hence I formed this Muslim organization 7-8 years ago. And I do a lot of other volunteer work, and I love traveling locally and internationally, both with family and without family. So that's my quick intro. Before starting the actual topic, let's take a quick safety moment. What I want to talk about, instead of talking a safety incident and other things like often people do. I want to talk about this duty of care. Duty of care is not very common if you haven't worked in any European or American or Western organizations, or at least in Western organizational culture. But here in Australia, duty of care is a legal obligation. And it is to avoid doing things that could foreseeably cause the harm to another person, foreseeably cause harm to another person. So a breach of a duty of care amounts to a tort of negligence, and if it leads to a harm to a person. And harm to a person could be as minor as hand injury or foreign body and eye, and as big as any huge incidents like listed here: Piper Alpha, oil platform explosion, BP Texas refinery explosion, Fukushima, Chernobyl, anything like that. So in Australia, we need to be aware of the laws in legislation and the acts which are in place. For example, the Law of Negligence and Limitation of Liability Act 2008. That's a federal law. And then there are many common laws in each state, such as, but not limited to, Occupational Health and Safety Act 2004 in Victoria, and then Work Health and Safety Act 2011 in New South Wales, and Workplace Health and Safety Act 1995 for Queensland, and then Work Health and Safety Act in 2012 for SA. It is important because the ignorance is not an excuse in the court of law. And with my many years of experience, I have seen and I have firsthand experience the court of law situation in case of health and safety issues and the breaches that organizations have done and gone through. And it's not only the organizations are not liable, people are also liable, and people can also be fined in case of if it is proved the duty of care was not observed by a person. So even the individuals can get fined. So WorkSafe website and WorkSafe publications are very good for that. So if you are working in Australia, if you want to work in Australia, if you want to come to Australia, make sure that you're aware of some of these laws. So that was my safety moment for today. Come to the topic now. So let's have a quick glance on the global energy outlook of our era. When I say our era, this is past 20 years and coming 20 years. So very, very quickly on this slide, the total generation in gigawatt hours, the electricity generation, global power generating capacity, where we are, how we are heading, how we moved in past 10 years, and you can see from 2020 onward until 2040. This data is presented and published by International Energy Association, IEA. And what I want to quickly show here is that what is going and prevailing the whole power generation is the solar. As you can see the graph from even now, it's, if you see in gigawatt hours, is 500 gigawatt hours, going to be crossing 3,000 gigawatts hour in 20 years and in near future. And if you look at the fossil fuel like coal and gas and even nuclear, they are sustaining. So gas is predicted to be increased because it's currently increasing at a very high pace. But coal is, alone my previous company in the Europe, they alone shut down 30,000 megawatts in past 4 or 5 years. So they're shutting down the coal, but still cannot get rid of coal, cannot go away from the fossil fuel. We still have to live with it, and there are reasons which we can discuss in our coming slides. Moving ahead, how Australia is doing. So it's a lot of information on this one graph or one sheet, but what I want to quickly talk about is a few things. If you look at the legend at the bottom left-hand side, it is showing the solar, hydro, coal, wind, all sorts of different power generation. in various states. So look at the right-hand side of New South Wales, which is the highest generating, which has the highest generating capacity among all the states in Australia, 22,000 megawatt generating capacity installed, 29% renewable. On second number, we have Queensland, which is 14,000 megawatt installed capacity at the moment and 7.9% renewable. And in Victoria, Victoria comes on third, and it's 11,000 megawatt installed capacity with 19.2% renewable. What I want you to look at Tasmania, which has only 3,000 megawatt capacity, is a small island, but it is 83% renewable. And the other thing to notice is the color code, so how the carbon intensity is state-wise. So as we can see, which you really can't see Tasmania because that is filled completely with a lot of hydro assets which they have, and hence they are green. So they are the most green. And then we have South Australia, which is 31% renewable. And then 29% is New South Wales. And other states are lagging behind, particularly Queensland and Western Australia, which are very high on carbon intensity at the moment. Okay, so Jilani Sahab, are we going to take questions as we go, or we just wait until the end?
I think better we keep going so that
keep going? Okay.
Complete हो जाएगा, तो after that 40 minute के बाद ये session खत्म होगा और इसीलिए दोबारा join करेंगे. तो अगर most probably अगर आपने तब तक मुकम्मल कर लिया तो next session question answer का होगा, और अगर मुकम्मल ना हुआ तो फिर जब रीज्वाइन करेंगे तो जहां से आपका सेशन टूटा है वहीं से दोबारा. जी,
मेरा ख्याल है मुकम्मल नहीं होगा क्योंकि ज्यादा स्लाइड्स हैं. और दूसरी चीज ये है कि टाइम हमारा सेव हो जाएगा, क्योंकि जो वीडियो है मेरे पास, एक दो यूट्यूब वीडियो जो मैंने प्ले करनी थी जो कि नहीं प्ले हो सकेंगी, मैं उनके बारे में डिस्कस करूंगा, क्योंकि हमने टेस्ट किया था, वो साउंड की प्रॉब्लम है. तो मैं उनके लिंक फॉरवर्ड कर दूंगा ग्रुप पे, आप लोग बाद में उसको देख सकते हैं, बट मैं एक्सप्लेन कर दूंगा. मूविंग अहेड ऑन दिस next slide. So what it is showing here, what it is showing here is the national electricity grid in Australia. When we talk about the national electricity grid, it means that this is a ring main type of thing. If you think about a water pipeline where different consumers and different providers are connected, it's like a ring pipeline, a ring of a pipeline. It's same as the same analogy can be used for electricity grid. So all the electricity generated in a country is connected to a grid. So in Australia, we call it National Electricity Grid, but that covers only 5 states in one territory. And it doesn't connect to Northern Territory and Perth, and they have their own small grids because of the distance. You will be surprised to listen that this grid that you can see of different sizes of the transmission line, starting from 500 kV to all the way 110 kV, the total length of these lines above ground and underground is 40,000 kilometers. 40,000 kilometers, which is one of the largest grid in the world. Okay, moving on. How the electricity utility network works, I think most of us are know about it, and they're aware of that there is a generating station in the grid, or number of generating stations. It could be any type of generating stations, coal or renewables, like or a solar farm, or hydro, or any type of generation that is connected to through a transformer, because it requires to step up the voltage and step up the power of the line because of line losses, because lines are too long. And you have seen a lot of these HV lines in their power, in their towers, transmission towers, they're called. So they carry all those power lines and goes to a substation where it steps down again, because you cannot supply that very high voltage electricity to the distribution system. Then it goes through the distribution lines, these types of poles you have seen in your areas and around, maybe outside of your window. And then it has a power mounted distribution transformer. In Pakistan, in Wabda, we call it PMT. pole-mounted transformers, distribution transformers. They further step down and bring the voltage to a level so that it can be supplied to your homes or businesses. So that is a typical electricity network. A bit more about the electricity network. So what electricity network is called is it is called, like, unlike Pakistan and Middle Eastern countries where, just give me a second. So unlike Pakistan and Middle Eastern countries where the power companies have very long power purchase agreements to sell their electricity that they generate. But in Australia, our market is called merchandise market. And I'll talk about a little bit more what merchandise market means. But this market is very dynamic and very highly regulated here in Australia, and volatile as well. Volatile with respect to the prices. So price can go as low as below zero, negative. So we pay to generate, not we earn to generate. So it can go negative, and at time it can go $10,000 a megawatt hour. So hence it is very, very regulated, strongly regulated to keep the things under control. So as I mentioned that this market is called National Electricity Market, NEM. And what NEM is that most electricity that is generated here in Australia, bought and sold and transported in the market, needs to match the supply and demand in real time. Real time is the underlying thing. So unlike any commodity which you produce or you sell and you market or you buy, can be produced and stored, but electricity so far cannot be stored or cannot be stored in that huge quantity. So it is bought, sold, and purchased in real time. So the national electricity market fills this role of at East Coast and the southern states. As I said, NT and Western Australia is not connected. So what is NEM? NEM is one of the largest interconnected electricity system in the world. It covers 40,000 kilometers of transmission lines and cables, and it supplies around 9 million customers. And that is the problem. This second point is the problem, because what it means, 9 million customers and 40,000 kilometers. If you divide that, it's 225 customers per kilometer. Just imagine and compare it with your WAPDA system. How many customers in 1 kilometer of transmission line? So that is in itself a big challenge for electricity market in electricity transmission distribution here in Australia. So to manage and maintain this type of huge complicated system, and you'll realize how complicated it is in coming slides. But the Australian, China is saying it's end in 10 minutes. Okay. So we need to rejoin, right? So the Australian energy market operator performs the array of the gas and electricity market, operation and development and planning function. And this market operator is called AEMO, Australian Electricity Market Operator, AEMO. AEMO manages the national electricity market, the wholesale of the electricity market, and in Victoria it also manages the gas transmission network. So that is what AEMO is. A little bit more about the network, electricity network in Australia. So how electricity market works in Australia. So what happens that on the top of this picture, there is generators, so various generators, which could be government in some states, and in a lot of other states, it's privately owned, like generating station owned by my company, AGL. So generators use fuel, wind, water, solar to produce electricity. And then they send the power that they produce into the grid, as I showed you the grid. They sell their power and they produce to NEM, National Electricity Market. And what NEM is, a distributor in the network. So distributor in the network, they own all the network, like the poles and the lines and all the transmission. And they carry the electricity to Australian homes and businesses. The distributors are responsible for the interruptions of or faults of such as power lines. Then comes the retailer. So as you go towards the as you go clockwise on this picture, so you see the NEM, and then you see NEM is the wholesalers, and then it comes the retailers. Retailers are the one which you come across normally. So retailers buy the electricity as a whole at a wholesale price on the NEM, National Electricity Market, and then they sell it to the retail customers. The retailer is responsible for getting the customers connected to the network, like you get connected through any of your retail companies. AGL is one of them. Simply Energy is another one, and depending in which state you are, there are many other companies like that. And then they usually forces of supply and demand that affect the prices on the NEM, and the prices fluctuate accordingly with the supply and demand. So, and then the prices will likely be driven up if the demand is high, as you know, demand and supply, simple economics rule. And then, however, the generator compete with each other to sell the electricity. So, for example, AGL compete with their competitors to sell the electricity on the best price. And best price is very, very technical term, because healthy competition is in the market enforced by the regulator, AEMO. And although the grid can transport the electricity, it cannot store it, as you know. So it's a real-time trade. So the NEM needs to monitor the usage pattern in order to forecast the electricity demand. So there is always enough power in the system, in the grid, so that if you have a situation where you have a peak or a spike or any fluctuation, you don't have a power breakdown or outage. So as an example, there is in the UK, there is a TV drama called EastEnder. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. So because of that EastEnder drama, when it goes, I think I haven't given you the control, Jalani Sahab. So do I need to give you the control because people are joining? I think you muted, Jalani Sahab.
जी आप कंट्रोल रखें अपने पास अभी तक किसी
Okay. All right, I can keep joining people. Okay, thank you. So I was talking about the TV drama in UK. Because of that, 1.75 million kettles get switched on at the same time during the break. You might have heard this thing. So what happened? Jalani Sahab, you're saying something?
Sorry, आपके पास कोई ज्वाइन करने की रिक्वेस्ट आई हुई है, दिखाई दे रही?
मैंने कर दी अभी.
Okay, चलें ठीक है. Okay, that's good. Keep going.
Right. So what happened that because of that, the demand in the in the system increases, and there are additional standby generators are kept as a standby in the UK to cope that surge or fluctuation in the market. Not only that, even in France, just in case UK grid cannot cope, there are standby generators in France. They can supply the power to the UK during the break of that drama called EastEnder. So it's so sensitive, as you can understand. It's a real-time trade and real-time management. So in Australia, what happens? That extreme hot weather events, they can have the similar effect, and it varies with the hot days. And in market fluctuates, and incident happens. Back in 2016, there is a big incident happened in South Australia. So that is the function of AEMO in the market. So what happened that because of that fluctuation and the control of the prices and people are competing, so every generator bid in the electricity market on 48-hourly basis. So at every 48 hours, price bidding changes, and you have to bid, and then either you make money or you lose money. It's a game like that, and that price for 48 hour that you bid is called a spot price, and the spot price can go, as I mentioned, as low as below zero and as high as $10,000 per megawatt hour. Right. So I'm not sure if I explain it enough so that you can understand it, but we can have more questions, more discussion during the question sessions if you have any question or anything is not yet clear. Right. So we said that Australian grid and network is one of the largest, but actually how much we generate? Actually not that much. So look at in 2019, we only generated 265,000 gigawatt hours. And it's not a huge generation because Australia is not a big market. It's only 23 million population. So our growth rate is also not very great. As you can see in that box, if you can see my, my pointer, in that box there is only 1% increase in power generation since last year. So from 2018 to 19. Having said that, we are 21% renewable overall in Australia. In our solar growth, which I showed you in the first graph, the global graph, the solar is going, is ramping up and is going to continue to ramp up in next foreseeable future. So in Australia, the solar generation growth is 46% in a year, which is a very, which is very encouraging, very good from the generation, from the electricity market and the environmental point of view. Anyway, we still have 56% of our total generation based on coal and 21% based on the gas. And there are different types of gas generation that we'll see in coming slides. So this is our overlook of the Australian electricity market. Now, world is currently still heavily relying on the coal, as we saw in our initial slides. So the coal and the natural gas and the fossil fuel, any kind of fossil fuel, whether it's oil, coal, or gas, they are non-renewable energies. So what happened that they deplete with the time, and they're becoming too expensive and environmentally damaging and becoming unsustainable way of power generation. So in contrast, renewable energy is the one is called renewable because it's naturally replenishable, and it will never run out, and it will remain in use without impacting the environment too much. So what renewable energies are in use typically, as you can see on this slide: solar, wind, biomass, different types of biofuels, fuel cells, hydrogen fuel typically, geothermal, because we have heat and they are not going to run out, and then naturally replenishable, and they leave very less environmental impact. And there are different types of renewable energy sources that we use for power generation. Let's look at some statistics quickly. So let's see my screen. Right, so this slide is, I don't want to spend much time on that. This is just showing the non-renewable versus renewable energy in gigawatt hours in 2019 state-wise. So as we saw in one of the Australian map slide, that Tasmania is the one which is 98, 99%, 97, 98% renewable as compared to the non-renewable in different states. Tasmania and South Australia are the one who are leading in renewable energy. Next slide is showing the renewable energy in Australia by percentage. As you know, we said, I think this slide is saying 94%. I think this was 2018 slide. Australian electricity generation by non-renewable fields. So this is in a glance. So 2018 in past 30 years. So in past 30 years, how the non-renewable fuels contributed in power generation, be they coal, brown coal, black coal, natural gas, oil. So test their growth or decline. Yeah. And next slide is about the renewable fuels. So the total renewable. So 30 means this is 2019, and it's like this slide I couldn't put the years there. So it's 1 to 30 at x-axis years. So it's going back all the way 1990. So since 1990, this is how the renewable generation, renewable fuels in power generation came in and contributed. So, for example, sustaining as a renewable fuel in past 20, 30 years is still doing the same. Not many new hydro plants are coming up, except Snowy 2, Snowy Hydro 2. By the way, AGL, in AGL, we have 17 hydropower stations of all different various sizes, and some other big power generating companies within Australia. They have a lot of other hydro in Tasmania, New South Wales, Victoria. And wind, as we can see, is ramping up in past 10, 15 years. As we can see, this is wind line, it's ramping up. And solar also ramping up. This one is solar, which is following the global trend. Further, Australian generation by non-renewable fuel-wise in past 5 years, as we can see that non-renewable fuel, black coal, brown coal, natural gas. So that's various different. As we can see, coal is still sustaining and is going to sustain in the future forecast. At the renewable fuels, which is mainly wind and solar and hydro. So yeah, in geothermal. So this is fuel-wise how we going. As we can see, if you look at this yellow color, wind, this is wind, it's continuously increasing. And the solar, which is blue color, is also continuously increasing. So as far as the increase and decrease is concerned, as we can see on this slide quickly, in various different states and territories, coal is declining everywhere. Gas is up and down, but wind is increasing everywhere, and hydro is sustaining overall, and solar is increasing everywhere. All these different ways of presenting the slide is interesting. What next slide is showing, this slide is showing, is the Australian energy production and consumption and energy intensity. So what I want to show on this slide is that the blue line is GDP growth. So Australian GDP growth in past 15, 20 years is continuously increasing. Having said that, the GDP growth cannot come without the electricity increase, the electricity consumption increase. So electricity consumption is increasing, which is a good sign and healthy sign of GDP growth. But at the same time, you can see the energy intensity is dropping. And that's a positive thing. So, and that's a positive thing that this statistics in Australia is showing, that the energy intensity is, carbon footprint is dropping, with even the GDP is growing, and even the power consumption is increasing, energy consumption is increasing, and productivity is increasing. So that's a positive message that I wanted to put through this slide. Now, come to the topic of types of power generation. So how many different types of power generation we can think of? You don't need to think, I'll show you. So they are in alphabetical order, not in any specific order of the type or the size of the power generation, but I'm not going to read through, but this is what fuel that we use. Gas, black coal, brown coal, different types and grades of coals. Briquette also, Coal byproducts, there are many byproducts of the coal. Coal seam gas, coke, condensate, hydrocarbon, residual from the refining process, conventional gas, crude oil, LNG, liquefied natural gas, and LPG, liquefied petroleum gas. So these are all fossil fuels, and there are many different types of renewable generations: hydro, geothermal energy, wind power, solar, ocean waves, and tidal energy, and some other types which are. So we'll look at some of these types of power generation based on fuels in a little bit more detail in coming slides. So this slide is typically showing the theoretical power generation cycle of a gas turbine plant or a Rankine cycle, if you remember your academic days. So not going into too much detail, but this is very typical. I'm showing the difference between the conventional, this is the conventional. Every power engineer knows it, learn it, understand it, and can explain it. But we're not going to explain it here. It's a theory. In pictorial form, the gas used for power generation. So this is gas, natural gas. Gas turbine is similar type of turbine, which is a aeroplane jet turbine. Same thing. So you compress the air through the compressor here, burn the fuel in the compressed air, and then the gas turbine produces the power. That power on the same drive train connected to the generator. Generator generates the electricity, which goes to the grid through transformers. But what happened in an open cycle, all that for very hot gas, up to 500 degrees centigrade hot gas can release to atmosphere, which is inefficient, which is not environmental friendly. So the combined cycle gas turbine power station comes in the play. And then this hot gas is not released to the air, and it is taken into a boiler, which is called heat recovery steam generator, HRSG, which heats the water that comes into the boiler, converts it into the steam, and that steam is taken into another power plant, which is adjacent on the same facility, and that's a steam turbine. The steam turbine rotates the generator and generates further electricity from there. And then that water condenses through a cooling water cycle. Either it's a pond cooling water or a cooling tower type cooling water system. And then it gets condensed back and pumped back into the boiler. So there are various different cycles, but it's more efficient, and you consume as much heat as possible from the fuel that you burn and convert it into the power. Then we look at the conventional thermal power plant. In thermal power plant, the power is generated by using any type of fuel, whether it's a gas, oil, anything. We burn that fuel, the fossil fuel, in the boiler, where water circulates, water comes, converts into steam, steam goes to dry.
तनवीर साहब, आपकी आवाज़ मिस हो जाती है चंद सेकंड के लिए, तो ज़रा थोड़ा या तो करीब हो या कोई सेटिंग का मसला है कहीं।
मैं थोड़ा करीब रहता हूँ,
दरमियान में मिस हो जाती है, आई डोंट नो,
ब्रेक हो जाती है आवाज़। Okay, I'm sorry about that. So I was talking about this conventional thermal power plant, if you missed that. So this is a very typical conventional thermal power plant where we generate power using the water steam power, and steam goes in cycle into the boiler and then get condensed after rotating the turbine, and turbine rotates the generator produces the electricity that goes to the grid. Moving on, another type of power generation is hydropower generation. So what hydropower generation is, that you still have the turbines, different, which get rotated using the water power. In a typical hydropower dam, which stores the water body, and then water is taken using its head energy of the water level. The water is taken into a turbine, hydro turbine. Most hydro turbines, there are different types of hydro turbine, like Francis turbine, Kaplan turbine, and Pelton wheel turbine, but most efficient one and the modern technology is the Francis turbine, which is up to 60% of the hydropower these days are using the Francis turbine. Then it has a generator. No need to explain the generator, what generator is. And the transformer, they are the main key components of a hydropower plant. But on the next slide, this is an animation showing that there is a dam which stores water, that produces the and the intake called penstock, which takes the water into the turbine rotating the hydropower, and then release into the draft tube. Can you hear me? Can you still hear me? Is it clear, or am I still breaking?
You are breaking a little bit in between, but overall we can understand what you're saying.
All right, no problems. Right, so the other type of power generation, before I go into the wind, I'll just show you a quick. Is that what it is showing is that he's asking that how about the renewable energy, and he's saying that I'm a huge fan. So this is the farmer. This is the farmer. Most of these wind turbines are actually installed on farmlands, and they're the farmers. So there are two types of people you hear time to time in the media, and this was a video. The link later on. So if the farmer has 60, 80 or 100 wind turbines on their land, they are getting up to, in Australia, they're getting up to $100,000 a year income just for having their wind turbines on their land. But the neighbor, next door neighbor who has no wind turbines on his land, he's complaining about everything. He's complaining about noise. He's complaining about the shadow. He's complaining about their cows are not milking, all sorts of things. But this gentleman who's earning money has no problem having the wind turbine on his own land. Anyway, so it was just a joke. But what wind turbine is actually, you have seen a lot of wind farms now popping up and growing everywhere. So how the wind turbine works is that the wind turbine turns the wind energy into the electricity using the aerodynamic force from the rotor blade. So this is called rotor. These are the three blades. Normally there are three blades. This component here, like a capsule, which sits on the top of the tower here, that you see from the distance, looks very small, but that has everything in it. So this has all the machinery in it, all the bearings, the gearboxes, the generator, everything in it. And there are other mechanisms to keep the turbine in the wind direction using the anemometer, which is installed at the back of the turbine, which sees the wind direction and wind velocity, and then controls the turbine. The wind turbines are highly, highly automated. In many cases, you don't need to go onto a wind turbine tower, which is very high, up to 80 and 100 meter high. In modern wind turbines or large wind turbines, we have lifts, escalators in every wind tower. But the older one, you have to climb the monkey ladder. So in some wind, they are so reliable and so automated that in some wind turbines, you probably no need to go up tower for anything more than once a year or twice a year, really. If you have 100 wind turbines on a wind farms, and there is a team of 6 or 8 people who manages, maintain, and operate the wind farm, they hardly need to go up. So anyway, so not going too much into detail of how the wind turbine works, and I can have separate sessions. I'll gauge the interest, and we can have more sessions on various different types of generations if we want. But just to see how big the wind turbines are, my next slide is showing, which is this. So on the bottom right hand side, there are few famous buildings, as you can see. Somehow I lost my. Yeah, so some of the common buildings, and the largest wind turbine these days are this is showing a 6 megawatt wind turbine, but they are normally offshore, they're not on land. But in Australia, we don't have that big size wind turbine. I think our biggest at the moment, typical is 1, 2, 3 megawatt wind turbines. We have 4.5 megawatts in our fleet, which is the largest, which is at least equal to the London Eye size. Not this bigger than this, but at least the London Eye size is very huge. And one wind turbine blade, when it is transported, you can see it's a huge thing. So wind turbine span is 150 meters, which is bigger than any aeroplane at the moment in operation. So they are huge, they're big. The other type of renewable generation is a solar power plant. So on a solar, I don't know if you have seen any big solar power plant, but solar power plant from the air looks like this. They have millions, literally millions and millions and several millions of the solar PV cells on a wind farm, on a solar plant of 100 megawatt size. And these are typically converting the sunlight either directly, like a photovoltaic cell, which is on your roof, similar to that, or through a solar thermal power plant, which I talk about later on, into electricity. And they come in very variety of the types and sizes, and the technology these days that they are movable, they follow the sun path, they follow the direction, and all the panels, they move in the wind, in the sun direction to harvest the maximum sun power during the day. So they are typically the solar power plants. And you are aware of this arrangement, which may be on your roof. So you have a solar panel on your roof, then you have an inverter, because the electricity generated by solar panel is direct current, and you have to convert it into the alternating current to transport it. That goes through the meter in your home. And meter is a two-way, which you can supply to the grid when you have excess power, or you can get the electricity back. Solar power is called the high quality electricity with less fluctuation, and if you have them, you're using them, is less chance of having any of your appliances damaged because of any fluctuation. They're good in that sense. Moving on, a typical grid scale solar power plant, which I showed you, have millions and millions of these types of solar panels. Same arrangement, but they are more automated. They are remotely monitored, remotely operated. Which is on a remote location, there's nobody there. Normally they are unmanned plants. And this is the other type of solar thermal power plant. So it has millions of cells gathered around this tower, which literally reflecting solar light onto that.
तनवीर साहब, हम आपकी आवाज दरमियान में मिस कर रहे हैं, तो आई डोंट नो कि क्या इशू है.
Okay. I'm sorry about that if the sound quality is low. Is it because of video? Let me switch off my video. Maybe that will improve. I don't know. Can you still hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
So it could be due to video, maybe it's bandwidth. So I'll just reduce it. I'll just switch off my video. So yeah, so this is a typical solar thermal power plant where the solar power is used to convert the water into steam. The steam drives the steam turbine, and that generates the electricity rather than the solar itself generating the electricity. Okay, and moving down. So this is another type of hydropower plant called pumped hydro. So a typical pump hydro has a reservoir, a high level upper reservoir and a lower reservoir. So recently in AGL, we bought a facility to convert that into the pumped hydro mine. So what it is that there is a lake, you should have a lake at lower level, and up at high elevation, you have another lake or a reservoir. So we don't have a reservoir. So what we have is that we bought an abandoned copper mine, which is like a hole in the ground. And then what we're going to do is that we put this hydropower plant here, pump the water back into the upper reservoir, and then during the low electricity rate time, during the night time, we can pump it back up. And during the high electricity demand period, we can use it as a normal hydro, bring the water down, generate the electricity, and then during the night time, when the prices are low, we can use the same, get the electricity from the system, use it as a pump, and pump it back. So this is a two-way. The other type of this pumped hydro can be installed on a running river as well. So there is no lower reservoir, but it's a running river where you can up and then generate. There are with some innovative type of power generation. This is another one, which is geothermal. So this is typically a thermal power plant, steam turbine generating the electricity. But where it gets steam is from underground. So from underground, where very high temperature into very high pressure steam. That steam uses in the wind in the turbine to generate electricity and then pump back into the ground. So the condensate is pumped back into the ground, and then so hence it is called renewable source of energy. Another type of renewable power generation is the tidal power generation. There are two different types of it. But what it does is, so on the left-hand side, you see a big facility of tidal power plant. It has the sea on one side. It is a naturally built arrangement. So it has a bay. It has a basin, lower basin on the other side. In high tide, what happened that it has a turbine in the tunnel, and the gates can be closed for the maintenance in the turbine tunnel. And there are a number of turbines like that. On a high tide, water is allowed to come from high side to the low side, and then in the tidal basin. And on the low tide period of the day, the water can go back, and it generates electricity both ways. That's another type of power plant called tidal power. Right. So where to from here? So here I had to play a video, which I couldn't because of the technical issues. Here these links, you can watch these videos. So, but all these power that we generate is to be generated during the real time. So what happened that during the real time when you generate it, you cannot store it. But the latest technology is coming up. You're aware of a lot of batteries are coming up by Tesla, which is leading. But then AGL is now developing their own batteries. They're bringing the batteries. So what it does is that you have to have the solar panel on your roof, and then have a battery for storage. So you generate power during the day, store it, but then you are connected virtually, or you are connected physically to the grid, and then all the people in a neighborhood are connected into that grid, and the grid become a virtual power plant because of the artificial intelligence. The grid will learn the pattern of your usage. So your usage and your generator and your generation during the day, and then your usage pattern during the night time. So the preference will always be your home. So you always get power either from your own system and your battery, or from the grid. And grid can also charge your battery as well if your battery is drained. So it works both ways, and it is completely virtual and become a virtual power plant. So we do, unlike a conventional power station where you have 100 megawatt or 500 megawatt or 1000 megawatt power generating station, or a wind farm or a solar plant, each house will connect to the grid, and then the whole grid will become a virtual power station. There are videos about it. So this is the future. This is where we, as a grid, as a country, going. Right. Now, there is a second part of my presentation, only a few slides, and that is talking about what engineers are doing and what are the prospects of engineers in the power generation in the power industry. So they are asking, these kangaroos are asking, did you really come to work to Australia? Or then there are so many engineering fields in the power generation. For example, very typically the maintenance engineers in all the fields. There could be there are operation engineers in generating stations and power generating companies, engineers, project and construction engineers, design, development and manufacturing engineers. There is a huge manufacturing going on because of these renewable power generating facilities, because they are small in size and they are large in numbers. So a lot of manufacturing engineers. Diagnostic condition monitoring engineers working in the industry, performance and efficiency engineers, IT software, hardware engineers, strategy, risk, business planning engineers, data scientists, environmental sustainability engineers, chemical and process engineers, nuclear, mining, and there are many specialized disciplines. So if you are qualified and experienced and trained in one of these above disciplines, you are likely to get a job in power industry or power generating industry. And the pay scales in power generating industry in Australia are generally higher than the normal market for engineering jobs. They are higher, they're 20 to 30% higher. So I just did a little bit of search that what power generation market is like at the moment, even in the COVID situation. So on this slide, I've gathered some data from various different job sites. For example, on seek.com, here on the left hand side, there are currently 1,358 jobs advertised for engineers in past month or so, out of which more than 1,000 jobs are full-time jobs. More than 600 jobs out of them are 205 of them are actually 150K plus jobs, and some very highly paid 200K plus jobs are there as well, which are either management role or leadership role or specialized engineering roles. And there are many other job sites, as you know, Jora.com, LinkedIn, and Indeed. They are also having number of jobs advertised at the moment for the power engineer, for the job market for the power engineers. And on the right hand side, I looked at how renewable engineers market, job markets are doing. So on seek.com, there are 76 jobs advertised in past months, 76 on Jora, 51 on Indeed, and 16 jobs currently advertised, including one I posted yesterday for a dam engineer required for our hydropower plants on LinkedIn. Right. So what it requires to become a power engineer. So I just put some resources here from IEEE, which is very renowned organization, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. And they do lots of seminars and they do a lot of research. They release papers. People can do the research with IEEE. They do the publication. Along with that, they do a lot of training programs. They have their educational resources, brochures, and newsletters. So I think if you are interested, you can join IEEE, you can become a member, you can just subscribe them. You can do interactive modules they have on power generation. They have university competitions as a student. There are a lot of career counseling and resources there. And then I think when you come to a new country, when you come to a new job market, you need to assess yourself. You need to weigh yourself and how you fit in that market. If you are interested in coming to this power generation and become a power engineer, You sometime may need to retrain yourself. You need to re-educate yourself, upskill yourself, in some cases volunteer yourself. And on top of that, you have to have a professional CV, not a generic CV. Generic CV doesn't work these days. You have to be very specific about, look at the PD of the job, and then have a professional CV for each and every job based on the PD of the job. So if you are a candidate, I wish you best of luck to become a power engineer. So, and if you are a candidate, or if you're not a, then I'll say enjoy the post-COVID summer holiday.